A pen's gotta know its limitations. And that is why we will have another fountain pen shootout. Today I would like to have a look at two relatively inexpensive pens. They're both made entirely of plastic. They're both clear, at least my versions are. They're both small, and that's it. So today we'll be comparing the Kaweco Sport Classic and the Pilot Petit1. Let's have a look at the Kaweco first. I think this is a very nice pen. I think it cost me €16.95, something like that. So about 17 euros, which is not an awful lot. You have to buy the clip separately, so the clip actually comes off. You have to buy it separately. Yes, it's plastic. Yes, it's small, but you can unscrew it, you can post it, and then you have a very reasonably sized pen with a 21K gold-plated nib, which is not at all a bad deal. Some issues with this pen: well, it doesn't really come with a converter. In fact, there is no such thing as a Kaweco converter for these pens. I use the Monteverde Mini converter. Excuse me, Monteverde Mini converter. I have a video on this. It sort of fits in there. It's not a very tight fit. You can't really click it in place in the section, but the barrel is just the right size to keep the converter in place. In all, I think this is a very nice pen. Then let's have a quick rundown of the Pilot Petit1. I'm in the process of cleaning it, so it looks a bit messy, but it comes in a number of colors. I picked the green one. It doesn't really matter. You get the clip, which is just plastic. The whole thing is plastic. You get these nice little relief sort of buttons sticking out there, and the cap actually clicks in place, and then you can use it as a reasonably sized pen. The nib here is just stainless steel, not the greatest nib in the world, but definitely not the worst either. I've had scratchier nibs. A very interesting feed system. I will show you that in the when we do the writing sample. And that's pretty much it. So how do the pens compare side by side? Well, as you can see, possibly, when capped, they're roughly the same size. I think when posted, the Kaweco will win. I think it'll be a bit bigger. Let's just check that. No, the difference is pretty minimal, but the Kaweco is just a little bit bigger. Alright, so, of course, the one big difference, by the way, before I forget this, the Pilot pen has this typical Pilot cartridge system, which has this weird plastic ridge in there, so you cannot use this Monteverde Mini converter in this Pilot pen. Alright, so the one big difference between the pens is the nib. On the Kaweco Sport, as I said, it's 21 karat gold plated, and on the Pilot it's regular stainless steel. So yes, this nib will be scratchier. Also, you can it is just one nib. You cannot pick a width, whereas with this one you have fine, medium, broad, double broad, and you even have some italics now, so that's a very nice range. Which of the two wins? Well, for a number of reasons, the Kaweco Sport wins, as far as I'm concerned. So first of all, this takes a converter, which is useful if you want bottled ink and you don't want to refill a cartridge. It takes standard international cartridges, which is useful because these are widely available. If you take this on a journey, you run out of ink, you can just probably walk into any office supply store and get them. And the nib is super smooth. It's really, this nib is great. It's it actually puts some more expensive nibs to the challenge, so that's a really nice thing. Also, I kind of like the general design. It looks pretty weird, but it works well. It's very pleasant to use, even if you have large hands. This pen is really cheap. I think I paid $4 or something like that, so it's extremely cheap. Yes, it feels a bit cheap, but it'll get the job done. If you want to have a fountain pen on the road, this is a nice pen. As I said, the nib is a bit scratchier than on the Kaweco, but that's pretty much it. I like it. I like the overall design. It's a bit of a strange looking pen, but as I said, it's simply a pen that will get the job done, and that's all there is to it. So, enough talk. I think it's a good idea to have a look at the pens and see them in action. I'll disassemble the two of them for you, and then I'll do a writing sample. And that's all there is to it. So I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye. Okay, the Pilot Petit1 and the Kaweco Sport Classic. Let's have a look at the Kaweco first. As I told you, there is no converter commercially available for this, but you can use some converters like the Monteverde mini converter, which I'll put in there in a second. First, I'd like to show you the parts of the pen. So this is one of the few pens I know where you can actually remove the clip. So if you don't like it, you can just use the pen without a clip, which is a nice touch, I think. And not so nice touch that you actually have to buy the clip separately, but okay, whatever. The barrel, nothing fancy there. And here we have the feed, the section and the feed with the nib. I'll use a broad nib today. I also have a medium nib, but I really like the broad nib on this pen. The feed and the nib. The nib is 21 karat gold plated, which is very nice, gives a very nice smooth writing experience. And on the feed there is a notch that will keep the nib aligned well. So we put that back in there. It doesn't really matter. I don't think there's any specific way you have to put this in there. So I just do that. So one problem with converting this pen to an eyedropper is that although you can remove the nib and the feed, you see this black thing here, the nib collar, I think, and the nib collar you cannot remove. Now the problem is ink gets trapped between the nib collar and the feed, and that is, well, it doesn't look very nice, and I think I don't know, I don't think it really will interfere with your writing, but I just really don't like it that much. So, actually I was trying to give you a close-up of the nib. It's not that fancy, it just has some nice ornaments on there. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so I put in the Monteverde converter. Now this fits very loosely. It doesn't really click in place, which is too bad. I've just been refilling cartridges. I'm not on heroin. I just push this in there a bit to try and force some ink into the feed. There we go. Now I got ink on my ink cloth. Right, there we go. So I hope it will write. Do a quick run. Yeah, I think it'll write. Okay, I cap it before it dries out. Now as you can see, the converter is in there quite loosely. Not that loosely. I have to pull this back a bit. There we go. So if you do this, then just tap it so we get some ink in there. So this is how it should usually be. The converter is just held in place by the back end of the barrel. So it's in there loosely, but it cannot move around. So it just barely fits, which I guess is okay for the current purposes. Just, I got some ink in the cap. Well, okay, whatever. I'll clean this later on. Here we have the Petit1. Let's have a look at the Petit1. So this is all plastic, like the Kaweco. This has the most interesting feed system I've ever seen. Let's remove the barrel. You can convert this to an eyedropper, but the problem is the barrel kind of sticks out. You see that? And you cannot fit a rubber O-ring between the barrel and the feed. At least I was unable to do this. Then this gets very loose and it will just fly off. So what I tried was to put an O-ring simply on there, and then at some point it snapped because you kind of push the cap on there all the time. And then suddenly I had, I think it was Dragon's Napalm ink all over my hands, which was even worse than my current situation. And I was in a train, so that was fairly, well, a disaster, really. Here we have this typical feed system. You see that plastic thing there. It really hampers the cleaning, so you probably have to use a cleaning cartridge. I show you how to do that in my extensive fountain pen cleaning video. And there we go. So what's interesting about this feed system? Well, first of all, let's see if I can remove the nib. Oh, that was pretty easy. I don't need the tape. I think this is the same nib you will find on some other of the lower end Pilot pens. Nothing wrong with that. It's not the smoothest nib, it's not the scratchiest, it's okay for everyday, you know, writing short notes, etc. Now what's interesting is the feed. You see all these gills there? No, that's not too special. Here I have a Platinum Preppy. You see these gills there too. So that's not this special. What's kind of special about this is, well, I'll show you next. Here I got one of those little things you get in a Swiss Army knife. Now I can push out, there's a little hole there, I can actually push out the feed. There we go. Here we have the feed. This is the same type of feed system, at least I think so, as is used in a felt-tipped pen. It's just a type of rod that has to saturate with ink, and then you can write. So I thought that was pretty unique in a fountain pen. I have to push that back in there. There we go. Okay, put the nib back on there again. And then this is a refilled cartridge, so this is going to be interesting. I squeeze it a bit aggressively to get the feed saturated. There we go, there you see? So I would like this ink level to get a bit further up there. So I'll cheat a little. At least I'll try to put some in the other way around. Now you see this saturates, and hopefully we can now write. Just do a quick jab off camera. Yep, it writes. Great. Right, there we go. Writing then. Just adjust the camera a bit. Okay, well, there we have it. Hope this is going to be stable. Let's start with a Kaweco. There's a big drop of ink there because of my action earlier on. Here we go. Kaweco Sport Classic in broad. And here we have the Pilot Petit1. Petit1, not exactly sure where to put the stress, and it doesn't write. I was afraid something like this would happen. Well, there's a lot of ink there. Petit1, Pilot, and the nib is, well, fine, I guess. Let's do some writing. I'll start with this one, because it's writing now, and I don't want it to stop. Avoiding the ink drops is for losers, so I'll just continue writing. The ink is waterman blue. It's a very nice ink, responds very well. Okay, maybe some line variation. Well, that's pretty much it. So, don't expect an awful lot of line variation here. This is pretty much, this is pretty much all you get. So, it is a stainless steel nib. It's a very simple nib. It doesn't really open up or anything under pressure. Let's do some writing here. The reason this line does not look very even is that there's a big drop of ink there. I caused that earlier on when I tried to push ink out through the converter. Now I've probably dried it out. Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's better. This is a more consistent line. Okay, so one thing that's awesome about the Kaweco is that the nib is very smooth. It's a very pleasant nib to use, and I really, really like it. It's smooth, responds well, it does not offer you an awful lot of line variation, but I guess under pressure there is some. But most of all, I'd say that this is a €17 pen, so it's $16.95. Okay, you have to buy the clip separately, but even so, for this money you get a very smooth nib that can actually compete with nibs 10 times as expensive. So it's a really nice everyday writer. You can convert it to eyedropper if you really want to, and I really like that. The Pilot Petit1, on the other hand, well, it's a nice pen if you do some short notes. I wouldn't recommend using this pen or buying this pen to do extensive writing. If you have a lot of writing to do, I mean, the nib is pretty scratchy. Let's listen to this. But it's not a bad nib. It's just not nearly as good as the Kaweco's. Then again, this is 21 karat gold plated. This is just stainless steel. What can you expect? So here we have it. Two fairly inexpensive plastic pens. At least one of them has a very nice nib and the other has a nib that's definitely acceptable. It's just not the smoothest in the world. And that's it. So I hope this comparison was useful, and I'll see you later.